Welcome to the latest episode of Dig This, a podcast by The Quarry. Today in the studio, I've got Jon Watkins, CEO of Resilience Development Company.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah,
Yeah. Just make sure I get that right.
Yeah.
To start off,
I even looked down then. I was like, I know it's that.
Yeah, it's handy. You've got it there. I've got it
Yeah.
here. Just opening up, resilience, a word we hear a lot. Could you just define that for us to start off with?
Yeah, it's such an interesting word, isn't it? Post-COVID, it just went mad, didn't it? I think we look at it, well, we as a company think it's looked at in maybe a slightly unhelpful way. And I'll explain what I mean by that. So typically, if we ask most people what resilience is, it's bounce back coping. What resilience actually is the ability to positively adapt. So that's the key word. It's being able to adapt. That's what resilience really is. And because of that mainstream view that it's about bouncing back and coping, which is an absolutely correct way to view it, but that tends to be a therapy and counselling way of looking at resilience because they sort of owned that word for quite a long time. But actually, when we go into most organisations, and I think everybody listening or watching today or yourself, we don't really want to bounce back and cope. We've only got a finite amount of energy or time where we can do that. There's a reason why most change programs, for example, fail, because you just get people to hopefully bounce back and cope through it. They can't do that. We're not designed to do that. So resilience, the ability to positively adapt to small things, not just to the big stuff, small things that happen every single day. So for us, really, what we like to show people is how to bounce forward. You don't want to go backwards. You don't want to cope. You don't want to survive. You want to know, well, how do I move myself forward from this situation? And that's really important. So how do I bounce forward individually, but also collectively? So a lot of the times people see resilience as an individual trait. And that's absolutely fine. We are resilient. But what's really important is that you create a resilient environment around you. And I think occasionally people view resilience as confusing it with endurance or mental toughness. And again, that is two very different things, both important in their own right. But I think the easiest way to look at it is if your behaviours are coming at a cost to you or the people around you, you're probably not using resilience from our perspective.
If we go back on your journey with resilience a little bit, how did you get into this field?
Yeah, so interestingly, I went to university. I got lost at university, not in a bad way, but all my friends were off to solicitors and accountancy. I was like, that's not me. I was into my sport. So I went military, I went Royal Marine Commando, I went British Special Forces after a couple of years, got bored of being a Royal Marine, wanted to go to that next level. Interestingly, as I look back on that career, I wouldn't have said I was resilient. I had resilient traits, but I wasn't resilient. I was mentally tough, physically and mentally robust, not necessarily resilient, which I think is interesting. And I came out of that world. I got medically discharged. I was very ill. Nearly didn't make it through that. And I was looking for a job. And by pure coincidence, my recovery was in Jersey. Fell very ill there, had to recover there. My family were based there, so I was allowed to stay there for sort of the 12 months recovery. And while I was there, knowing that I was having to look for another job, I just started to talk about management and leadership. Management and leadership on all the social media platforms, met up with a couple of local people who specialise in that. And my former business partner, David, invited me to a coffee and said, you've got some interesting views, let's chat. You've got an interesting CV. Do you fancy coming on our program? It's different. And I was with, like most people are, or a training program, probably a waste of my time, especially given the amount of money that's invested in me. And I'm supposedly this massively high performer in this elite environment. I went on it anyway. And it's a very good training program, bias. And it just grew me in lots of different ways. Not necessarily in managing pressure, although it did. But for me, it was the ability to connect with people that were very different to me from different worlds. So I grew a lot of strength in that area. So leading and managing people, really, which is odd because I was trained and paid to do that anyway. And really loved it, thought it was great. And about 6 months after that, they said, you fancy coming on board? And the rest is history. And that was about 10 years ago.
Have you taken any sort of key learnings from that sort of military high pressure environment background into what you're doing today there?
Yes and no.
Yeah.
So there's absolutely nothing that we show people today that is from my military background. We spoke, a little bit offline about this. The military is very, very interesting because it's totally alien, obviously, to the civilian world. And the reason why it is 99% of what we do is training. Even in my world, the majority of your life is spent training. So actually, you develop a lot of these traits, resilience, mental toughness, endurance, through training. You don't necessarily learn the skills. So when you come out of that environment, you kind of feel a bit lost at times. And yes, there's lots of other reasons why people get lost, but some of those great traits you had, and everyone, and what makes a high performer, focus on what you can control, remain positive, all of those things, but they tend to be restricted to your environment if you haven't been trained in the skills. So yes, I've brought my character, my personality, and my character strengths, which developed hugely in the military as I went through that journey. People that I went to school with, if you told them I was going to the Royal Marines, they'd have laughed and said, that's never you. But I grew through university, grew through the Marines, grew through Special Forces to where I am now. So that has come with me, absolutely. Some of the other core technical skills in how I lead myself, look at other people, manage projects, all that sort of stuff. But a lot of the skills that I show people were built by the team before I got there. And although I did some of the traits, being able to name the skill and be taught it makes a huge difference. So yeah, yes and no to that one. Yeah.
What kind of reaction do you get to this message about resilience and more of a focus on people, I guess, is what we're talking about?
Yeah. So when we go into lots of organizations, obviously most people bring us in from the top, and people are almost forced to turn up. So a lot of people turn up to resilience training going, I'm not broken, I don't need to be fixed. What am I doing here? And I think you get that with lots of training anyway, but in particular that buzzword of resilience. In reality, you can't really do a lot to change that. We can educate people in that very short period of time and saying, well, actually, that's not what we're going to do here. We're going to show you how to bounce forward. But we get to the training as quickly as possible so they see how useful the skills are. And generally, we have people after the first session. So I'm running some events today. After 10, 15 minutes, I'll have people and they'll get it because we'll put them through an experience and they'll go, oh, I get this. But yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Most people, I don't want to know, I'm not broken. Please don't try and fix me. I'm not a therapist. We're not here to do that. I'm here to give you something else. I'm here to allow you to go from good to great in most areas of your life.
And do you find companies are interested in this area or investing in this area, or do they prefer investing in computers and tech and
Yes, yeah. I think it's an area where companies need to invest a hell of a lot more, in my view. Like, I come from a background where people are your most important asset, and their mindset and their thinking, their character is what delivers the results. The technology is there to increase those results. And I, to be honest, I don't think it's any different in the sort of the real world, the civilian world. And yet, as you've pointed out, the majority of budget, and I spoke off air about this. I was talking to CEO yesterday. I said, how much do you put aside each year on your P&L to reinvest back into your IT? X% of the business. And I go, okay, how much do you invest in your people to make sure they at least maintain their level of performance? Oh, silence. Literally nothing. And I find that absolutely crazy. The world, humans haven't really changed in thousands and thousands of years. Technology is changing around us. The world's speeding up. What's being expected of us is changing. Social media, all of those sorts of things. So there's an incredible need, I feel, for people to have skills and investment that they don't have. Of all the challenges we face, are they technical or are they mental, emotional, and social? They're mental, emotional, and social. How much training have we ever been given in those areas? Zero. Those are our challenges. Those are the needs, and yet we do not invest in them as much as we should do. My perspective, slightly biased, but I think the data shows that. And it's not just, lots of talk about well-being. It's not just well-being. It's performance, it's mental health, it's leadership, it's management, it's navigating change, transition. You need to train people how to do that. We don't do that naturally. When you do, companies get an advantage.
You're talking about, the data and the evidence. So
Yep.
can you talk to that a little bit more about what evidence is out there that?
Yeah, so there's very, very broad stuff. There's lots of broad studies. I could talk very specifically about the things that we measure. And again, I think some of the barriers to companies investing a lot in their people is they're just unsure of the investment. You know what you get from IT. You're not sure what you get when you get training coming in. And most training organizations, coaches, therapists, psychologists, although that's a different conversation, do not measure the change. And sometimes it's very difficult to do that. But we use a few core measurements on every program that we go in and do. And by program, I mean we're going to see you at least 6 times in the space of 10 weeks. That's what I mean by program, not a one-off workshop or series of workshops. We use measures like GAD-7, which is a screening tool used in health to measure anxiety. And what we find is at the moment, out of sort of 5,000 people that have been on our program, around 24% of people would score a level that would put them at sort of moderate, severe anxiety. So a GP should be taking action. So it fits within the 1 in 4 bracket. We drop that to 50%, by 50%, to around 11, 12% in our 12-hour program. So that's a massive, massive, significant change. We also measure stress, we measure mood, and again, we're seeing massive, significant results in there. We've looked at burnout. Around 44% of people come in our program at risk of burnout. We drop that to 18%. So those are the measures looking at sort of the changes in people through our program towards the end. But then what we see from those changes, so those outcomes, you can start to look at business benefits. And again, unofficially, we've had companies tell us, well, actually, we made a £2 million profit this year. That was down to the changes we've seen in people. We've seen massive shifts of engagement. Local government agencies, departments have told us, if you hadn't have done that, there's no way our people would have adapted to this technology and this change this quickly. So, there's lots of that sort of evidence. We know for every £1 people invest, they get £12 back. We increase the capability by people by about £9,000 per person. That's our measurements. Gallup has lots and lots of different things. If you lose a person, it costs between 50 and 250% of their wage, for example. So you can take that data and then you can apply it to our sort of stuff. And at the moment, we're seeing that around 12% of people that come on our program were thinking of leaving an organization. So again, you can start to work out an ROI from all of that. I mean, this sort of stuff rolls off my tongue, but again, it's stuff that you don't see companies tend to look at. You never get the feel that people are treated, or learning and development is treated as a strategic resource. Whereas for me, it's the most valuable strategic resource you can have. You develop and grow your people.
It does feel, I mean, just the outside perspective, that companies may be very good at talking about this, but enacting it is a whole different ballgame.
Yeah, I think there's certainly a range. There's certainly a range with that. I think we see it in lots of people development areas, don't we? You go through fads. Wellbeing was one post-COVID. You've had DE&I as well in that bracket, and it does tend to fall flat at the sort of leadership level. How good are these leaders, and how do they value their people? And everyone says they value them. Do they invest in them? And I think that's the important conversation. I think it's very difficult. You've got a small budget. A lot of training out there doesn't deliver outcomes, benefits, ROI. So where do you put that? I certainly think people should be investing more in their people. We spoke beforehand about what our big barriers are as a company, and one of it is education. Educating people on what good looks like in terms of training, what is going to deliver a change. And I think that message still has to filter through. We think we can run a team away day or one-off workshop or a series of 5 workshops and get a result. Humans don't learn like that. We know how humans learn. Humans don't learn through e-learning. Humans don't learn from an app. You have to invest in cold, hard training. You have to get somebody you have to get them to hold a mirror up. You have to show people how to move it forward. It has to be simple. It has to be actionable. And I think those are difficult challenges to get right. But you get it right and you see lots of benefits.
Obviously, you've spoken about that sort of consistency and looking at it through a long-term lens. I mean, I'm going to throw a question out here, which might be a bit more short-termist. Anyone watching today or listening today, what would your key sort of tips be for them as individuals?
Yeah, I think that's almost the issue we have in the world, isn't it? I think people are exceptionally knowledgeable. That knowledge has gone through the roof in the last 5 years. If you tapped into ChatGPT and sort of had a bad day, how do I make sure I don't bring that home with me? It would give you a whole list of stuff, strategies and tips. Reality, humans don't necessarily struggle with that. What they struggle is, how do I do this? How do I actually do this? How do I change my thinking to make me think in a slightly different way, which changes my feelings and behaviors? And I was with a team last week, UK government team, and they were drafting a charter. And one of the things they wanted to do was, well, we don't want to send emails, we're in a bad mood. And I said, how do you do that? And they were like, oh, I don't know. And I think that's the big challenge, isn't it? Very knowledgeable, so I could get loads of tips and strategies. But it's only when you're trained in the skills that it becomes really interesting. So I'll have a go at sharing some of those skills now. And I'm just going to start with the first thing we ever show people. And people know, since COVID, more and more people have known the answer to this question. But it revolves around the difference between pressure and stress. A lot of people used to see them as the same thing, where they're two different things. And the big thing for a lot of people is recognizing, well, actually, the only person that ever causes them stress is themselves. You have a load of pressures put on you. How you react to respond to those pressures determines whether it turns into stress or not. So a starting point is actually learning to recognize, okay, at what point do I flip from pressure to stress? That is a little bit of knowledge, but it tends to be the first place we start. The second place we start, I can't do here, is put them through a situation where I demonstrate it, and then we show them how to beat it. This is probably our most popular skill, and it's a very easy one to share. If you recognize that you're feeling a little bit stressed, just ask yourself, will this matter in a week? Will it matter in a month? Will it matter in a year? We spend about 70% of our life on autopilot. In that time, something called rumination tends to happen, and that's what flips pressure to stress. If you recognize yourself on that autopilot journey, traveling on the road, staring at a set of traffic lights, thinking about that meeting, that interview, that presentation that didn't go well, just ask yourself, will this matter in a week or a month or a year? And that tends to bring people back to planet Earth and realize most of the time the answer is no. So you can move on. The other thing I would say to people, which is ironic because I like to talk quick, is slow down. We live our lives at 1,000 miles an hour. And this isn't necessarily a skill that we show people, but I think it's really important to do this. We bounce from meeting to meeting, email to email, and we just go, we're on the train and we're off. But actually just learning to pause, focus on your breathing. We hear that all the time. Easier said than done. How do we do that? But focus on your breathing. The key is out breath longer than in breath. Make sure your out breath is longer than your in breath, and that will naturally switch on relaxation mode. So you can then go and answer your email, for example. So that's the second thing I would massively suggest. We run around 1,000 miles an hour. Just learn to slow down and focus on your breathing. The third thing which we do show, which again is a skill, everyone knows this, and that is take regular breaks. That's not hard. What people don't understand, and I suggest people go and Google this, is something called the ultradian rhythm or ultradian rhythm. It's utterly fascinating. It's inbuilt in all our cells, but very simply, your brain will switch on at point zero. It takes about 20 minutes to fully focus on a task. Then after around 90 to 120 minutes, it will start to switch off. It will give you warning signs. Hunger and thirst, potentially. Yawning is a big one. Fidgeting. But the key one is losing focus. So when you start to read through that script, when you read through that email and you have to reread it 2 or 3 times, that losing focus in a meeting that's gone on for 2 hours, that is your brain telling you, I need a break, help, switch off. What we need to do then is switch off between 5 and 20 minutes. That's hard. Yeah, A&E nurses training them in this sort of stuff was hard. But when you can, you've got to step away for 5 to 20 minutes. That will allow your brain to recharge so you can go again. And what you find is if you don't do that, that's why 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, someone taps you on the shoulder and you erupt at them. Or worse, when you get home and your children run through the door and they're like, Daddy, Daddy, Mummy, Mummy, look, here's what I've done today. And you just go, what? And my 5-year-old is at me with information. I'm like, I haven't got anything left for you because I haven't had enough breaks. And inevitably you reach the mobile phone because it's easy, it's automatic. So recognizing when you're yawning, fidgeting, when you are losing focus and remembering to step out and take a 5 to 10 minute break, what you find is your productivity will go through the roof, your stress response won't need to kick in, and you'll have far more energy at the end of the day. So that's not necessarily something people don't know. However, the ultradian rhythm and its impact When you start to understand that, it becomes really interesting. And if you really get geeky about it, it has a massive role to play in Alzheimer's, in cancer, in all those sorts of things. We know how important sleep is. That 20-minute break you're supposed to have every 90 to 120 minutes is basically your cells sleeping, regenerating, recharging, fixing themselves. If we don't do it, that comes at a big cost. And just sharing that bit of science, we aren't knowledge-based programs, but sometimes you have to throw it in there, is enough for people to go, oh, I need to take some breaks here. So those are three not bad places to start. Will it matter in a week, a month, a year? Slow down, make sure you're out breath longer than you're in breath, and take regular breaks. Not rocket science, I know, but if you want to know the good stuff, come on the program.
And obviously, like we have spoken about the importance of like this long-term journey. It's not just a quick fix, and quite often in certainly in modern life, we're looking for that quick fix, aren't we? Whichever part of life we're in, we want to get fit, but we want to do it quickly.
Yeah,
You know,
we're pretty impatient, aren't we? Yeah. And, it's maybe part of the challenges businesses see. But yeah, there is and there isn't a quick fix. We can show you skills. You can use it the minute you leave the room. It will have an impact. But can you do that when you're under pressure in 6 weeks' time, 10 weeks' time, 2 years' time? That's really where you want to get to. And that doesn't necessarily take time, but it takes reinforcing, revisiting the skills and regular visits to those, which again, we know how humans learn, short and regular. How often do training programs reflect that? Very little. It's either short and see you in a long time, or long and we won't see you again. It doesn't deliver change in people. That.
Where do you see this kind of field going in the next, say, 5 years or something like that?
Yeah. There's been a lot, and this is across the board. Obviously, AI has stepped in and made everyone sit up and take note. We've been looking at AI for 2-3 years now. We've been interested in that, but it's complementing what we do face to face. Is there a point where AI will deliver everything? Yes, but I think what we find is if you leave people to their own devices, e-learning can be as good as you like. AI coaches can be as good as it likes. People won't use it. They're far too busy. There's far too much going on. There's far too much negativity outside of the workplace and the world at the moment. Our app that we provide, its uses has dropped significantly in the last 3-4 years. And that's not because of that's because of where people are at. And I do not think, and there's been a lot of studies in the US about the impact of technology in mental health and well-being. And if that is the only way you're going, it doesn't have a benefit. If you use it as a tool to support, then that's where the benefit happens. And I think that's where I hope people are going to go. So for us, it will be using technology to deliver our skills to people on a plate, short, sharp, once or twice a day. Here it is, refreshed. A good AI coach, not a bad one. There's lots of bad ones out there, but a good one that you can use to help you use those skills. That for me is where we want to go. But ultimately, yeah, AI will become big. You can already see that now. The big companies in our world are already going to AI. They're providing AI coaches. They're providing e-learning via apps at people's fingertips. I think you've got to take a step back and look at how do humans learn. And I'm speaking to a lot of companies at the moment that have invested in that technology, and they're seeing that there is very little usage of it. If you want someone to change, you still at the moment need somebody sat in front of them driving that. And I don't think you're going to get that through technology just yet. That's my view. We'll see. Don't get me wrong, we're not dismissing it. We still invest it. We're still at the table. But you need the good stuff, and that will supplement it. If you just go with that, I don't think it'll do it yet.
And just finally, if you cast your mind back over the last few years, is there a particular success story that you could share with us today?
Oh, loads. Is there a particular one in mind that I can share who would be happy for me to share this story, this journey for them? So we'll go one-on-one coaching. I'll take someone from that level. No, do you know what? We won't. We'll use it as a group because this person will get hidden in the masses. Won't share names. So a person came to us and they've been seeing counselling and therapy, and we're not there to replace counsellors and therapists. But they came to us They said, I've been seeing these people for 20, 30 years and it's not really helped. And they only came to us about 5 weeks in and he shared the story. And we're back to that bounce back, bounce forward. And the thing about counselling and therapy, the way I view it is they are trained to help you look back into the past. So they bounce back. Not everybody needs that who goes there. In fact, I think the majority of the world need to know, how do I move myself forward? And this person there was one event in their life that had held them back. And they'd kept revisiting and revisiting and revisiting. Sorry, it wasn't until they came on our program where we showed them how to move forward, move their thinking, move their mindset forward from that. And they came up to me at the end of the program and they said, I've been holding on to this for 30 years. And the last week is the only time where I've not thought about it. And that was massive at the time. Realistically, we tend to see 20% of people, it's life-changing. But that to me really stood out because they were coming from sorry. Because they were coming from a military background. So, and it was something that happened to them back then, not a PTSD event. It was just a failure that happened. They didn't know how to move themselves forward. So that resonated with me because it's on message with us. People need to know how to move forward. You show them how to do that. You give them the skills to do that themselves, and it becomes incredibly powerful. So that stuck to me. But we get lots. We do lots of people come and talk to us, and some of our testimonials are really, for me, it's children. So we had someone the other day, and my child is constantly bullied at school, constantly. And you can go to strategies and skills. You can go to strategies and tips to help them. Sometimes actually you need to go a bit more than that, which is obviously where we specialize in. And I just showed this person 3 or 4 skills. One of them, which we're going to do with the IOD a bit later in the evening session, is our tendency to look only at the negative. And everybody listening will know that. You go home, you ask your children, your partner, or even reflect yourself on, how's the day been today? And immediately you go to, well, this didn't go well, I didn't go well here, and this person wasn't great, and this negative. But actually, there's always a huge amount more positive in there. So just showing them the skill to get the child to look at all the good stuff that was going on was really, really powerful, and showing them how to use that properly. But just getting them also to focus. And one of the things that causes us stress, and everyone knows this, is we focus on things that's outside of our control. So showing them a skill to help them focus on what they can control, both as a parent, as a child. And then the feedback you get from that when they start to see their child behaving differently becomes really powerful. The third one I'm going to share, because we worked with a school and it was from a massively disadvantaged background. And we were working with just a small number of their students. And one of the bits of feedback that the deputy head gave us, and this is after the program, was I got a phone call from the mother of one of these students, and the mother rang me up and said, I've had such bad anxiety that I haven't been able to leave the house in nearly 6 months. My son came home and talked me through 2 skills that he'd learned on this program, and I'm now able to walk him to school. And it's that sort of stuff that becomes really powerful. So yeah, we hear a lot of good stuff, but when we work with students, then it becomes really powerful. Another child had behavioural challenges, and they found that almost every morning or afternoon, the deputy head would see them storming around the school playing field, because that's their coping mechanism. They took themselves out of class, stormed around the field once in the morning, almost every period. The feedback from the deputy head after the program was they haven't done that once since they've been on the program. They were able to navigate their social emotional triggers in the moment in the class, and they're able to be a bit happier. So lots, but there's a few.
That's an incredibly powerful message, and shows the value of what you're doing, and hearing those stories is fantastic.
Yeah, we're not doing rocket science, and there are other good stuff out there. We don't hold this exclusively, but people don't have the skills. If you give them skills, how much it cost to train me? I don't know, £1 million. I never got trained in skills. If you'd given me these skills, wow, I'd have been far more effective. It doesn't mean I wasn't already. And I think that's the barrier lots of people have to get through. It's not This is not, you're not good, let's try and fix you. It's good to great. And that's what skills give you wherever you're at, personally and professionally.
Jon, thank you very much for your time.
No, pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for tuning into this podcast. If you've got all this way, I'm really hoping that you've enjoyed our work. There's a few things you can do though to support us. Follow, like, subscribe, share, whatever you can do to help spread the word of The Quarry. The other thing you can do is head on over to our website, where you can become a member and really support independent local news.